that? It's almost midnight, Paul asked, his voice thick with sleep and surprise. He watched his wife's silhouette against the dim hallway light, the phone still clutched in her hand like a guilty secret. She lingered in the doorway, a shadow of hesitation in her posture. "Oh, it was my boss," Alice replied, the words tumbling out in a rush that felt rehearsed. "There's a last-minute conference, a huge industry summit. I have to go." And this couldn't wait until a decent hour? Paul propped himself up on an elbow, the sheets rustling. The digital clock on the nightstand burned a relentless 11:48 p.m. What conference is so urgent? Are you sure this is mandatory? "I'm afraid so," she sighed, the sound meant to convey reluctant professionalism. "It's one of the biggest events of the year. All the major players, keynote speakers unveiling the next big thing. I can't miss it. It's career suicide." "But you were just at that symposium in the city last month. Is there really no one else they can send?" His question hung in the dark room, met only by the low hum of the central air. "I don't want to go either, Paul," she said, slipping back into bed, her body a tense line beside his. "You know how much this means for my trajectory. It's just 2 weeks, you understand, right?" Paul fell silent, a familiar knot of resignation tightening in his stomach. He'd grown accustomed to these sudden trips, the empty side of the bed, the dinners for one. "Okay," he finally said, the word heavy. "If it's that important, I've gotten used to you being gone, and I don't like it. I'm going to miss you terribly." "I'll miss you too, sweetheart," she murmured, pressing a cool cheek against his shoulder, a performance of affection. "The faster I go, the faster I'm back, and when I return, we'll get away, just the two of us, somewhere tropical. I promise." 2 weeks, he repeated, as if trying to convince himself it was a manageable sentence. 2 days later, under the harsh morning sun, Paul heaved his wife's sleek, oversized suitcase into the trunk of a waiting cab. The weight of it surprised him. It felt loaded for a much longer journey. "That's it, I'm off. Love you. Don't be too lonely without me," Alice chirped, planting a quick, dry kiss on his lips before sliding into the back seat. As the car pulled away from the curb, she didn't look back. Instead, she pulled out her phone, her fingers moving with a practiced swiftness. She opened a private messaging thread, one hidden behind an innocuous folder name. "Just left the house, on my way to the airport," she typed. The reply was almost instantaneous. "Perfect. Our room is waiting. I've missed you so much. Can't wait to see you." It was punctuated with a string of flame and peach emojis. A sly, triumphant smile spread across Alice's face. Her gaze flickered to the platinum wedding band on her finger, a symbol that felt suddenly foreign, a prop in a life that was no longer hers. Paul was a good man, kind and steady, but steadiness had curdled into monotony. With Marcus, though, just the thought of him sent a thrilling, illicit shiver down her spine. This wasn't a conference. It was a carefully constructed alibi for 2 weeks of sun-drenched abandon with her lover. She knew it was morally bankrupt, a betrayal of the deepest kind, but the promise of what awaited her on that coast made rational thought evaporate like sea mist. The island was a postcard of decadence. For days, Alice and Marcus existed in a bubble of salt water and silk sheets. She lay on the beach, the sun a warm weight on her skin, watching him emerge from the turquoise surf. Water droplets glistened on the hard plains of his chest and shoulders, and a raw, possessive desire coiled within her. She wanted to drag him back to their villa, to lose themselves in the languid hours. But as their final days bled away, a cold dread began to mix with the heat. She had built elaborate daydreams on this fling, fantasies of a future. "Marcus," she began one afternoon, her voice casual, testing the waters, "when I finally get everything sorted with Paul, you think we'll be okay, making a real go of it?" The large man settled onto the lounger beside her, draping a damp towel over his shoulders. His hand, broad and veined, came to rest on her knee, a gesture of casual ownership that once thrilled her. "You'll need to handle your exit strategically," he said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Get a good lawyer. Don't just hope for an amicable split, plan for a war." His pragmatic tone irked her. She had envisioned a tearful, dramatic confession to Paul, followed by her moving into Marcus's spacious apartment, where they'd spend weeks in a blissful, inseparable haze. Speaking of plans and unexpected turns, what's a relationship gamble you've ever taken? Was it worth it? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button for more stories about life's messy crossroads. On their last evening, they dressed for a farewell dinner at a cliffside restaurant. Alice sipped expensive white wine, laughing at Marcus's jokes, but her mind kept drifting north, to the suburban home and the uncomfortable conversation that awaited her. In her private thoughts, Paul had become a foolish, oblivious figure, a mama's boy too dull to see the vibrant life his wife was living right under his nose. Yet the practicalities of divorce loomed like a storm cloud. "Soon," she declared, raising her glass with a forced brightness, "soon I'll be free and I'll be with you. That's the real dream." Marcus paused, his fork hovering over his plate. He set it down with a soft clink. "Whoa, hey now, we never talked about that." The air between them solidified. Alice felt a plunge of ice-cold reality in her gut. Talked about what? You moving in, making it permanent. He leaned back, studying her. "Alice, I have a wife, 2 kids, another on the way. I thought you understood the situation." She could only stare, her mind scrambling to replay every intimate whisper, every promise she'd inferred from his touch. She had heard what she wanted to hear. "You want a divorce? That's your business," he continued, his voice calm, detached. "But I'm not blowing up my life. My family is... it's solid. We had a great time, but this was always just a getaway." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of stunned silence. The next day, in the sterile airport terminal, he offered his final, brutal analysis. "Look, no sane man leaves his family for his mistress," he said, tucking a strand of her hair behind her ear, with a tenderness that now felt cruel. "If you'll cheat with me, you'll cheat on me. That's just the calculus. My wife is having my daughter. This chapter? It's closed." The flight home was a 9-hour coffin of humiliation. Alice sat rigid, the roar of the engines matching the furious, painful pounding of her heart. The beautiful future she'd painted had been a mirage, a product of her own desperate imagination. The truth was, she was terrified of being alone. Her entire adult life had been a relay race from her parents' house to Paul's arms, with other men as brief, exciting pit stops. Alone meant unloved, unwanted, abandoned. The taxi dropped her off in the familiar drizzle of her own neighborhood. A wave of pathetic resolve washed over her. She would go back. She would mend things with Paul, revive the comfortable, passionless marriage she'd once found so suffocating. Maybe with effort she could rekindle some faded ember of affection. She dragged her suitcase to the apartment door, the wheels thumping over the threshold. She inserted her key, turned it twice, and froze. Sounds. Movement. From inside their bedroom. You're home early?" Paul appeared in the hallway, shirtless, his face a mask of sheer panic. Alice didn't think. She shoved past him, her boots leaving wet prints on the carpet, and burst into the bedroom. A young woman she didn't recognize was scrambling on their bed, clutching the duvet to her chest. The cliché of the scene, the other woman, the tangled sheets, should have paralyzed her. Instead, a red-hot fury erupted. With a guttural cry, Alice lunged, grabbing the girl's arm and yanking her off the bed. A chaotic scuffle of limbs and shrieks ensued until Paul finally managed to wrestle Alice away, pinning her arms to her sides as she thrashed like a wild animal. "How dare you? I'm working my fingers to the bone and you're here with this? I hate you! Let me go!" she screamed, her voice raw. The other girl, eyes wide with terror, snatched her clothes and fled into the night, a whirlwind of shame and silk. Paul only released Alice when he felt the fight drain from her, leaving her shaking and hollow in his grip. "I thought you'd be here, waiting for me," she sobbed, the anger melting into a wounded despair. "I thought and you just replaced me? Just like that?" Paul's expression hardened, the panic replaced by a cold, grim certainty. "I know exactly where you were, Alice," he said, each word a measured hammer blow. "I know you weren't at any conference. You were with Marcus on a beach for 2 weeks. So while you were sipping cocktails by the ocean, I decided to prepare a homecoming surprise of my own." His words were a final, devastating blow. Alice searched his eyes for a shred of the gentle, forgiving man she'd married, but found only a stranger reflected back. Wordlessly, she pulled away. She stuffed the clothes from her suitcase, the same clothes she'd packed for her fantasy, back in with violent efficiency, the silks and linens now feeling like costumes from a bad play. Within minutes, she was gone, the door shutting with a finality that echoed in the empty hall. An hour later, she was crumpled on her friend Anna's plush rug, tears staining the blush-colored fabric. Anna stroked her hair, murmuring platitudes about forgiveness and second chances, about love being a choice to rebuild. "How can you forgive this?" Alice choked out. She had always sworn from her most idealistic teenage years that infidelity was an unforgivable line. Now, drowning in the consequences of her own crossing, that conviction seemed laughably naive. By the next morning, the moral high ground had eroded completely. They were both guilty. They were both wretched. Were they still the two people who had once vowed forever? The following day, armed with a shaky speech, Alice returned to the apartment. She paced the hallway, a nervous teenager again. When Paul opened the door, she braced for rejection. Instead, he simply stepped aside, wordlessly letting her in. The familiar scent of their home, coffee, old books, hit her with a painful wave of nostalgia. He put the kettle on. "He's been thinking," he said, his voice quiet, before she could launch into her rehearsed plea. He sat across from her at the kitchen table, the same table they'd shared 1,000 mundane meals. He took her hands in his. "I think we should try again. We tore each other apart, but maybe we can build something stronger from the rubble, something real this time." Alice was speechless. This was the last scenario she had allowed herself to hope for. "Let's just forgive each other, truly forgive, and then forget," he proposed, his thumbs tracing circles on her palms. "I know I wasn't the perfect husband. I got complacent. Let's get a bigger place, start trying for a family, and make a new vow to never make each other feel this invisible, this desperate ever again." Alice couldn't form words. A dam broke within her, and she dissolved into tears, collapsing against his chest, not in romantic passion, but in utter, exhausted surrender. In the strange, quiet months that followed, a new dynamic took root, careful, deliberate, and surprisingly sturdy. The seismic betrayal had, in a horrifying way, leveled the ground between them. They talked more than they ever had, planning a future with the careful diligence of architects on unstable land. The specter of outside temptations vanished. Neither had the stomach for it anymore. Alice didn't know if what they were building was love or its sophisticated imitation, a partnership forged in mutual salvage. But she clung to it, hoping with a desperate, pragmatic hope that this hard-won peace would be enough to last them a lifetime.